Good evening, everybody. I'm a convert to the cause of independence, and I would like to begin tonight by telling you something of the political journey which brought me to this destination. Like Alec, I come from a Labour background. I was virtually born and brought up in the Labour Party. My granddad was one of the founding members of the first branch of the Labour Party in the county of Fife. He wasn't born in Scotland, he was born in Ireland, and he came to Scotland at the age of 4, the youngest of 11 children. They were what nowadays we would call economic migrants. They were looking for work, and at that time there were new coal mines opening up in Fife, and my granddad spent virtually his whole life. He left school at the age of 10, started working down the coal mine at the age of 12, and he spent virtually his whole life, mainly through the labour and trade union movement and in local government, campaigning to improve things for his fellow workers and his fellow citizens. And what was it that these people who founded the Labour Party were campaigning for? They were fighting for the right to work, fighting for a decent wage, fighting for a roof over their heads for themselves and their families, fighting for educational opportunity for their children, a free national health service for people who are sick. And what was it that drove them? It was a hunger, sometimes real hunger, hunger in the belly, but always it was a hunger for social justice. And that quest for social justice is just as relevant today in the second decade of the 21st century as it was at the turn of the 19th and 20th century when the Labour Party was founded. Look at the situation that we're faced with at present. We have at Westminster a Tory-led government which the people of Scotland did not elect. And this Tory-led coalition government is imposing policies upon us which the people of Scotland did not vote for. And as a result, they're rewarding the rich with massive tax handouts, and they're punishing the poor with massive cuts in their benefits, including the imposition of this iniquitous bedroom tax, which must be the most pernicious tax ever invented since the poll tax. So it's not surprising that people are crying out for change. Well, what does Westminster offer in the way of change? On the government benches, we've got Canavan and Clegg, Tweedledum and Tweedledee. When I switch on the box sometimes to look at my old workplace, I look not just at the government benches, but I look at the opposition benches, which I occupied for most of the time that I was there, and I see a leader of the opposition called Ed Miliband, who offers very little, if any, prospect of change. He offers very little, if any, effective opposition. I see no commitment there on the part of Mr. Miliband to undo these savage cuts which are being imposed on the poorest and most vulnerable people in society. And as Alec pointed out quite correctly, it took him the best bit of a year to eventually come out with a commitment to repeal the bedroom tax if and when he ever becomes Prime Minister. If and when he ever becomes Prime Minister. I just see, frankly, when I look at what the opposition at Westminster has to offer compared with what the government at Westminster has to offer, is just one brand of austerity versus another brand of austerity. And when I look at Mr. Miliband's underling in Scotland, the so-called leader of the Scottish Labour Party, she seems to spend a lot of her time bleating on about the something-for-nothing society and accusing the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament of handing out sweeties to the people of Scotland in an effort to get their votes for independence. Well, I ask you, is a free education service just a sweetie? Is a free national health service just a sweetie? Sweeties? A free national health service and a free education service were two of the important pillars on which the Labour Party was founded. And we now have so-called Labour politicians who do not know where they came from. They do not know where they're going. They've lost their moral compass, if they ever had one, and some of the Labour pioneers, like Keir Hardie and Nye Bevan, must be burling in their graves. I think, in all honesty, that the Labour Party has lost its soul. And I don't see how changing the occupancy of number 10 Downing Street is going to bring about the changes, the radical changes, the fundamental changes which I want to see and which I believe that the majority of the people of Scotland want to see. I've got no faith left in the status quo. And I see independence, okay, it's not going to be a panacea for all of Scotland's ills, but I do think it is an opportunity, a massive opportunity, to bring about the changes which the majority of the people of Scotland want to see. Now, I said earlier that I'm a convert to the cause of independence, and my conversion is not based on any great emotion. It's based on my experience, particularly my parliamentary experience. I spent, some people may say I misspent, 26 years at Westminster, followed by 8 years in the Scottish Parliament. I've been retired now for 6 years, and I haven't just been vegetating. Retirement has given me time to think, time to reflect on some of the big events which have affected us over the past half century or more. And I have come to the conclusion that Westminster is completely out of touch with the people of Scotland. Now, the Scottish Parliament, by contrast, I'm not saying it's perfect. I mean, it's made up of human beings, and human beings of their very nature, they sometimes make mistakes. But by and large, I honestly believe that in its, 14 years of existence, the Scottish Parliament has shown itself to respond far more positively and far more readily to the wishes and the needs and the aspirations of the people of Scotland. And let me give just a few examples to justify that assertion. Students in Scotland get a fairer deal because they don't have to pay tuition fees. Senior citizens in Scotland get a better deal because if they require care in the community, then the personal element and the nursing element of that care is provided free of charge. Sick people in Scotland get a fairer deal because they don't have to pay prescription charges. Compare that with what goes on south of the border, where students are having to pay up to £9,000 per year in tuition fees. Elderly folk have to pay at least part of the cost of their care in the community, and sick people have to pay £8 plus for each item in their prescriptions, which is, of course, a tax on the sick. So I believe that in its 14 years of existence, the Scottish Parliament has proved, and I've always believed, that judge politicians not just on what they promise. There's an old saying in the Bible, by their deeds shall ye know them. Judge the politicians on what they actually deliver. And I think that the Scottish Parliament has shown in its short time of existence that it has delivered higher standards of social justice for the people of Scotland. But of course, the Scottish Parliament is very limited in its powers. The Scottish Parliament is not fully in charge of its own agenda. The Scottish Parliament isn't even fully in charge of its own existence. It's a creature of Westminster. It was created by legislation passed by Westminster, and if Westminster wanted to abolish the Scottish Parliament next week, then it could do so. And that is why I want to see the Scottish Parliament being fully in charge of its own agenda and having the full powers of an independent Parliament, because it will be able to deliver so much more for the people of Scotland. Again, let me pick on a few examples. If the Scottish Parliament had powers over defence and foreign affairs, then we would be able to decide whether we're going to get involved in illegal wars, and we would be able to decide to get rid of nuclear weapons. And if the Scottish Parliament had powers to regulate the financial institutions, then we'd be able to stop the bankers filling their pockets with big fat bonuses and bringing the country to economic ruin. And if the Scottish Parliament had powers over all the public services, including the Royal Mail, then we'd be able to stop this senseless privatisation of our postal services. If the Scottish Parliament had powers over employment and trade union legislation, then we'd be able to encourage a better dialogue between employers and employees, instead of the disgraceful way in which the trade union movement is being treated in Grangemouth and elsewhere. And if we had a Scottish Parliament which had powers over tax and national insurance, then we'd be able to introduce a fairer system of taxation and benefits, including the abolition of the iniquitous bedroom tax to which I previously referred. So, I do not see independence as an end in itself. I see independence as a means towards creating a better Scotland, a more prosperous Scotland, a fairer Scotland, and giving Scotland its rightful place in the international community. Before I finish, I'd just like to say a wee bit about the organisation Yes Scotland, because I chair the advisory board of the Yes Scotland campaign. We are a broad, inclusive organisation consisting of people of various political parties and people like myself who are not members of any political party. And it's not true that we're simply a front for the SNP. I know that a lot of people think that way, and sometimes it's a hard job persuading them otherwise. I recently came across a former constituent of mine who said to me, "Look, Dennis, I've supported you practically every election," she says, "but I can't support you on this. Surely you're no asking me to vote for Alex Salmond. My father would kill me if I voted SNP." I said, "Well, look, Janet, for a start, your father's been dead for about 20 years, so you're safe enough on that score. And I'm not asking you to vote for Alex Salmond. I'm not asking you to vote for the SNP. This vote that you're having in September of next year, it's not a vote for a party. This is a vote for Scotland's future. It's a vote to enable you to build a better future for you and your bairns and your grandbairns. And that's what it's all about. Another question which I'm frequently asked is, can we win? Well, if you look at some of the opinion polls and listen to some of the pundits, then they tell us that the other lot are ahead at this stage in the race. But I've always believed that this is not a short-term sprint. It's more of a marathon campaign, and having run more than a few marathons in my time, I know that it's not always the runner who's ahead at the halfway stage who eventually wins the race. And I think that we have got something which the opposition do not have, and I think it's going to turn out to be a very, very valuable weapon indeed, because over the past year or so, I've travelled the length and breadth of the country in the course of this campaign, from Kirkwall to Kirkcaldy, from Stornoway to Stranraer. Here I am now in Kilbirnie. And I'll tell you, I must say that the opposition are virtually invisible at grassroots community level. They're very visible, of course, in the television and radio studios and also in the columns of newspapers. But this campaign is not going to be won simply in television studios or radio studios or newspaper columns. Yes, media coverage is important, but I'll tell you what's even more important is face-to-face communication with the people of this country. And we have an army of volunteers, something which the opposition does not have. We have an army of foot soldiers in every part of Scotland. And once we get these volunteers adequately trained and mobilised, Scotland is going to see the most comprehensive, the most effective, and the most victorious grassroots community-based campaign that we've ever seen. We are going to take our message out to every town, every city, every village, every street, every home, every workplace in Scotland. And we've got the people to do it, to get out there and win the hearts and minds of the rest of the people of Scotland. And our message, our positive message, is quite simple. That it's only by voting yes in this referendum next year that the people of Scotland are going to be empowered to build a better Scotland, a more prosperous Scotland, a fairer Scotland, and a Scotland that will play its part in the international community in order to help to build a better world. That is our message, and when we get that message across to the people of Scotland, we are going to win a famous and historic victory. So I say, let's go for it.